The metallic tang of the air, a constant companion, scrapes the back of your throat. It is not rust, not decay, but something far more insidious, the stale breath of contained lives, recycled and chilled. You trace a finger along the pitted surface of the communal table, the rough texture of familiar landscape beneath your calloused skin. Around you, the low thrum of the immigration detention holding facility vibrates through the floor, a monotonous chant of concrete and enforced waiting. Days here melt into an indistinct gray, each sunrise a pale imitation of the last. Your reflection in the polished steel of a serving tray offers back a stranger, Marcus Thorne, yes, but hollowed, the sharp edges of your ambition blunted by time and a gnawing silence. The badge, once a weight of purpose on your belt, now exists only as a phantom pressure, a constant ache where it used to ride. Now, your mornings are marked by the clatter of plastic trays and the distant, muffled cries from other sections of the facility. You sip the lukewarm coffee, the bitterness a welcome jolt against the apathy that threatens to consume you. It's been years since the fall, since the echo of a single name, Lena Petrova, became the brick wall against which your career shattered. The memory is a shard embedded deep, a constant reminder of the failure that defined your undoing. They called it a random act, a mugging gone wrong. You knew, deep in the gut that had rarely lied, that it was anything but. Lena Petrova wasn't random, he was targeted. Her investigation, a series of articles hinting at corruption reaching into the highest echelons, had been abruptly cut short. You had seen the threads, almost grasped them, before they slipped through your fingers, leaving you with nothing but questions and a ruined name. You do not look up immediately. Intruders are rare in this corner of your self-imposed purgatory. The guards here are accustomed to your quiet solitude, your preference for the periphery. Marcus Thorne. The voice is low, cultured, a surprising timbre in this echoing space. It carries the weight of authority, not the gruff command of a guard, but something older, more refined. You slowly raise your gaze. A man stands opposite you, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, a stark contrast to the faded uniforms and worn civilian clothes that populate this place. His face is sharp, etched with the lines of experience, his eyes a piercing blue that miss nothing. He is accompanied by a lone guard, who hovers respectfully, almost subserviently, a testament to the stranger's influence. You are exactly where you need to be. And where you always have been. He gestures to the empty seat opposite you. May I? You nod, a slow, deliberate movement. The man takes the seat, his posture ramrod straight, radiating an unsettling calm. He smells faintly of expensive cologne and something else, ink, old paper, the scent of secrets. My name is not important, he begins, his voice dropping further, as if the very walls possess ears. What is important, Marcus, is that certain elements have resurfaced. Echoes of a past you thought buried. Your jaw tightens. Lena. The name flashes through your mind, unbidden, unwelcome. You fix your eyes on his, a challenge in their depths. Get to the point. Direct, as always. Admirable. He leans forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. The Petrova case. It's burning. The words hit you with the force of a physical blow, stealing the breath from your lungs. The metallic tang in the air suddenly intensifies, choking you. You feel a tremor run through your hands, a sensation you haven't experienced in years. The quiet hum of the facility seems to sharpen, becoming a high-pitched whine. Impossible, you manage, The word raw. It was closed. Buried. Not deep enough, it seems. A new thread has emerged. A connection, slender yet undeniable, to the current presidential campaign. To a candidate whose ascent is swift. You feel the familiar stirrings of the hunter, the relentless pursuit of truth, a sensation long dormant, now flickering back to life. It is an unwelcome awakening, a pull towards a world you swore you'd abandoned. Why me, you ask, the question a desperate plea for logic in this sudden storm. I'm a ghost. Disgraced. No badge to protect, no career to preserve. You are outside the system, unburdened by its rules, and therefore, uniquely positioned. You are a loose end, a wild card. And you have a history with this particular phantom. He reaches into the inner pocket of his suit jacket, extracting a slim, uncreased manila folder. He slides it across the table. It stops just shy of your reach. The faint scent of old paper and something else, formaldehyde, perhaps, or the sterile tang of a forensics lab, wafts from it. Inside, he continues, his voice now a low hum of conviction, are the coordinates of a warehouse. An old printing press, abandoned for years. You will find a contact there. They will provide you with what you need. A starting point. A new lead, fresh from the ashes. Your gaze drops to the folder, then back to his unblinking eyes. The facility's hum continues, a relentless backdrop to this sudden, unexpected turning point. You can feel the tension radiating from the stranger, a quiet expectation. It offers not merely a chance at redemption, but a terrifying plunge back into the very conspiracy that consumed you once before. And you, Marcus Thorne, find your fingers slowly reaching for the folder. The ghost of Lena Petrova, it seems, refuses to stay buried. The folder on the worn table, thick with the weight of years and unanswered questions, pulls at your vision. You feel the gaze of the senior official, a silent pressure, a challenge. Redemption. The word echoes, hollow, yet strangely compelling. It's a ghost you've chased through countless sleepless nights, a phantom limb of your former self. Your jaw tightens. The memory of the journalist's cold, vacant stare, frozen forever in the crime scene photos, flickers behind your eyes. A random act, they'd said. A dead end. You had known then, deep in your gut, that it was more. You push back from the table, the chair scraping a protest across the linoleum. You pick up the folder. You don't look at him, your focus fixed on the grainy image of the journalist on the cover, a photo from a life before the abrupt, violent end. Young, vibrant, a spark in the eyes that even the poor print quality couldn't dim. The official leans forward, his expression unreadable. No catch, Marcus. Just an opportunity. A chance to close a file that's been open too long. And perhaps, to find some answers for yourself. He gestures to the folder. Everything you need is in there. Initial reports, witness statements, the original forensics. And some new intelligence that surfaced recently. You nod slowly, a single, decisive motion. The flicker of hope, or perhaps just a desperate need for resolution, ignites within you. You accept. Not for him, not for the system that cast you out, but for the ghost of a journalist you couldn't save, and for the shadow of the detective you once were. Back in your cramped, utilitarian apartment, the scent of stale coffee and forgotten ambition clings to the air. You clear a space on the small, scarred kitchen table, pushing aside an empty mug and a stack of overdue bills. The folder, now removed from the official's watchful eye, seems to expand, its contents eager to spill. You begin to peel back the layers of the past. The first few pages are familiar, a grim echo of your initial investigation. The journalist, Julian Vance. He was found in a secluded alleyway behind a downtown publishing house. Single stab wound to the chest. No robbery, no sexual assault. You trace the words with your finger, weapon, unknown. Motive, unknown. Those words had been a constant refrain, a mocking chorus in your early career. The official narrative had settled on a random street crime, a narrative you had vehemently rejected. As you delve deeper, past the yellowed police reports, you find the new additions. A thin sheaf of papers, stark white. Against the aged beige of the original documents. You scan the dates. Recent. Very recent. These aren't police reports. They're intelligence briefs, redacted in places, but enough remains to paint a nascent, disturbing picture. One name jumps out, scrawled in a hasty margin note, Senator Elias Vance. Julian's estranged uncle. A prominent figure, now making a significant push for the presidency. Now, the connection feels less like a coincidence and more like a carefully placed piece in a much larger puzzle. Another document catches your eye, a blurred photograph of a small, distinctive symbol etched into a piece of paper, found in a discarded notebook belonging to Julian. It's an intricate design, a stylized eye within a pyramid, not unlike certain historical fraternal symbols, but with a modern, almost corporate edge. A case that had also been dismissed as random, a victim with no apparent ties to anything beyond their quiet life. You begin to draw a timeline, the journalist's murder at its center. He was digging into campaign finance, into the murky world of political donations and shell corporations. To the right, Senator Vance's rising political star, now a full-blown presidential campaign. And beneath it all, the recurring, unsettling symbol, a silent, watchful eye. A shiver runs down your spine, despite the stale warmth of the apartment. This wasn't just a random act. It was a message. And Julian Vance wasn't just a victim. The redemption you sought might come at a price far greater than your lost badge. The rain had scrubbed the city clean in the hours since your decision, leaving a metallic tang in the air, a false purity. You stood in the alleyway where the journalist's life had been snuffed out, a forgotten crease in the city's concrete fabric. 10 years had etched deeper lines into the brickwork, but the shadows still clung to the corners, thick and unyielding. The scent of damp refuse and stale exhaust fumes hung heavy, an olfactory ghost of urban decay. You traced the outline of the spot where his body had been found, not with your fingers, but with the phantom weight of memory. The chalk outline, long washed away, was vivid in your mind's eye. A discarded plastic bag, emblazoned with a faded corporate logo, skittered across the wet asphalt, a restless spirit. The world had moved on, built over the raw wound of his absence, but for you, the moment was as fresh as the spray of graffiti defacing the adjacent wall. You remembered the initial rush, the hasty pronouncements of a mugging gone wrong, the pressure to close the file. Now, with the wisdom of hindsight and the cold clarity of disgrace, you saw the cracks in that narrative. You knelt, not out of reverence, but out of a visceral need to connect with the past, to find what had been overlooked. Your gaze raked over every uneven brick, every chipped mortar line. Then, beneath a loose paving stone, half hidden by a decade of grime and discarded cigarette butts, your fingers brushed against something. Not a weapon, not a wallet, but a small, deliberately carved indentation. A symbol. It was abstract, almost geometric, two interlocking triangles, one inverted, forming a stylized hourglass. You had seen this before, scrawled almost illegibly in the margin of one of the journalist's crumpled notebooks, during the initial investigation. Back then, it was dismissed as a doodle, a meaningless mark. Now, it pulsed with unspoken significance. A message. The clack of billiard balls punctuated the low murmur of conversation. You found him at the end of the bar, hunched over a glass of amber liquid, his face a roadmap of hard living. An old informant, a man who once traded hushed truths for leniency, now a phantom of the streets. Marcus Thorne, he rasped. His eyes, rheumy with age and regret, darting around the room. Thought you were a ghost, copper. Some ghosts never rest, you replied, sliding onto the stool beside him. I'm digging into the journalist's case. The one from 10 years back. A tremor ran through his gaunt frame. Buried deep. Sat. Said he had something big. Bigger than just the usual dirt. Who, you pressed, your voice low, urgent. He shook his head, a spasm of fear tightening his jaw. Don't know names. Just talk. Big talk and then. Quiet. He glanced over his shoulder, his paranoia palpable. Some things, Marcus, are best left undisturbed. Deeper than you think. He pushed his glass away, rising abruptly. Stay out of it. Its gray, windowless facade loomed under the bruised sky, a fortress of bureaucratic indifference. The air here was sterile, devoid of the city's usual grit. Inside, the waiting area hummed with a low, tense energy, hushed conversations, the rustle of official papers, the distant clatter of a closing door. You approached the reception desk, a barrier of reinforced glass separating you from a stern-faced administrator. His gaze was as flat and unyielding as the concrete walls. Marcus Thorne, you stated, your voice firm, I need access to records regarding inquiries made by a journalist, 10 years ago, concerning a specific detainee. Him fingers, adorned with a single, plain silver band, moved efficiently across a keyboard. Her expression remained impassive. We have no record of any such inquiries, Mr. Thorne. Our facility maintains strict protocols regarding privacy and access. And certainly, no journalist has ever been granted access to detainee information without proper legal standing. He was investigating something sensitive, you countered, leaning closer, trying to pierce her composure. Possibly corruption within the system. A specific individual held here with political ties. Her eyes, devoid of warmth, met yours. Our operations are transparent, Mr. Any allegations of impropriety are thoroughly investigated internally. There is nothing for a journalist to uncover here that hasn't already been addressed. Her tone was clipped, dismissive, final. I suggest you pursue other avenues. The message was clear, you were treading on hallowed, forbidden ground. Frustration gnawed at you. The warmth of that ember of hope from before now felt like a dangerous spark in a field of dry kindling. The cool dismissal of the official's voice still echoed in the hollow chambers of your memory, a chill wind against the rising storm within you. Transparent, he had said, her gaze like polished granite. Nothing for a journalist to uncover. The words were a gauntlet thrown, igniting a spark of old defiance in Marcus Thorne. You knew better. You always had. They were a mosaic of meticulous observations, half-formed theories, and cryptic jottings. You traced the faded ink, the frantic underlines, searching for the thread you knew was there, waiting to be pulled from the tangled skein. You remembered the politician, all polished smiles and promises of a brighter tomorrow, currently surging in the polls. You remembered the vague, unsettling whispers around him, the almost imperceptible hum of power operating just beneath the surface. The journalist had been digging into something connected to the politician's campaign, something more substantial than mere policy debates. Your fingers brushed against a recurring phrase, scribbled repeatedly in the margins, almost a mantra: Infrastructure Initiative, Project Chimera. Project Chimera. A seemingly innocuous corporate entity, specializing in large-scale urban development and logistical solutions. Solutions, you mused, a bitter taste in your mouth. Solutions for whom? You cross-referenced the dates, the locations, the names. The journalist had meticulously tracked Viridian Holdings' expansion into areas undergoing significant redevelopment, often areas with vulnerable populations or those earmarked for controversial public-private partnerships. And each move seemed to benefit the politician's burgeoning influence. A pattern emerged, stark and undeniable, like constellations appearing in a night sky. The journalist had been on the verge of exposing a systematic funneling of public funds into private hands, disguised as progress. A name caught your eye, circled with a furious red pen: Lena Ramirez. A former project manager for Viridian Holdings, abruptly dismissed, then later, a vocal critic of their labor practices and environmental impact. The journalist had interviewed her extensively, her notes indicated, before Ramirez had disappeared from public view. The facility loomed, a low-slung, featureless edifice of gray concrete and reinforced mesh, an architectural testament to containment. The air here was heavy with the distant thrum of machinery and the unspoken anxieties of those within its walls. A burly security officer, his uniform crisp and unforgiving, met you at the internal reception desk. His eyes, flat and unyielding, scanned you with practiced efficiency. "Purpose of your visit," he grunted, his voice devoid of inflection. "I'm here to speak with Lena Ramirez." You stated, your voice steady, though a tremor of unease snaked through you. "Regarding an old investigation." The officer's brow furrowed. A flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. He typed her name into a terminal, the soft click of keys the only sound in the sterile room. A moment stretched, taut and silent. "Lena Ramirez," he finally said, his voice flat, "was transferred last week. To a different facility." "And where?" He met your gaze, his expression hardening. "Standard procedure. Our records are confidential, sir. You have no official standing here." His eyes held a warning, a subtle glint that spoke of unseen pressures. "I suggest you leave." It wasn't just a bureaucratic stonewall, it felt orchestrated. Lena Ramirez, a key witness, moved just as you were closing in. It was too convenient, too precise. They knew you were looking. You walked towards your car, the gravel crunching under your shoes, a sound that suddenly felt too loud. A black sedan, its windows tinted to an opaque obsidian, sat idling at the far end of the lot. It hadn't been there when you arrived. As you reached your car door, the sedan's engine revved, a low, predatory growl. The vehicle surged forward, not towards the exit, but directly towards you, accelerating with alarming speed. Your instincts, honed by years of walking on the edge, screamed. You dove, a desperate, clumsy roll, just as the sedan's bumper clipped the rear quarter panel of your car, sending a sickening screech of tortured metal through the air. The impact spun your vehicle, grinding it against a concrete barrier. You scrambled, heart hammering against your ribs, adrenaline a bitter tang in your mouth, as the sedan swerved, braking hard, its reverse lights flaring. You were on your feet, breath ragged, fumbling for the door handle of your mangled car, but it was jammed. The sedan was backing up, preparing for another pass. There was no mistaking the intent now. This wasn't a warning, it was an execution. With a desperate surge of strength, you kicked at the driver's side door, forcing it open just enough to squeeze through the gap. You sprinted, a blur of motion, towards the chain-link fence bordering the facility, ignoring the searing pain in your side. The sedan screeched forward again, its tires spitting gravel, but you were already scrambling over the fence, tearing your jacket, leaving a strip of fabric snagged on a barb. You landed hard on the other side, rolling into a ditch filled with overgrown weeds and discarded refuse. The sedan's headlights cut through the gathering dusk, illuminating the fence line. You lay in the ditch, gasping, the acrid smell of exhaust fumes and damp earth filling your nostrils. The journalist's research, the politician's campaign, Viridian Holdings, Lena Ramirez, it was all connected, a web of corruption so vast, so powerful, that they were willing to kill to protect it. And Marcus Thorne, for the first time in a long time, felt truly alive. The air outside, thick with exhaust fumes and the distant murmur of the city, offered no clarity. Lena Ramirez, a wisp of smoke, dissolved into the bureaucratic labyrinth, her sudden transfer a move too precise to be coincidence. They knew you were looking. The officials. Dismissive gaze, heavy with practiced indifference, now felt like a warning, a subtle assertion of power. Someone was pulling strings, not just to hide a witness, but to actively obstruct your path. The cold case, once a ghost of your past, was now a tangible adversary, its tendrils reaching into the present, twisting the familiar into something sinister. You drove, the city lights blurring into streaks of crimson and gold, until the dilapidated structure of the abandoned factory loomed into view. Your makeshift workspace, a battered desk beneath a bare bulb, awaited. Scattered files, newspaper clippings yellowed with age, and cryptic notes formed an archipelago of information. You needed more than a name or a date, you needed a thread, a connection to the network that now seemed to orchestrate disappearances. Hours blurred into a single, focused stream. Names you recognized from the periphery of your own past investigations flickered like distant stars, too faint to grasp. The Iron Gate Accord. A forgotten shiver ran down your spine. That phrase. A sting operation, a joint task force targeting a low-level smuggling ring. It had dissolved quickly, deemed a dead end, its findings buried under layers of officialdom. You remembered the details, the precise way the Iron Gate Accord had been used, not in any official report, but in hushed conversations, a sort of internal shorthand among a select few. The journalist's source had spoken of it in the context of a much larger, more insidious network, a system of influence peddling and illicit contracts, far grander than any smuggling ring. He had connected it to a specific series of land deals, properties acquired through dubious means, then flipped for exorbitant profits. And one of those properties, a sprawling industrial complex on the city's outskirts, was the very one that had been the focal point of your failed Iron Gate operation. The operation, the one that had been prematurely shut down, the one you'd always felt was deliberately sabotaged, had been connected to this. The journalist was killed because she unearthed the same conspiracy that had swallowed your early career whole. You remembered the lead investigator on that original task force, a senior officer you'd respected, the captain. He had assured you then that the land deals were separate, a mere coincidence, too minor to warrant further investigation. You had trusted his judgment, his years of experience. He had dismissed your concerns, your gut feeling that something larger was at play. He had steered you away from the financial trail, redirecting your focus to the street-level operatives, the small fry. His reassurances felt like deliberate misdirection. He had actively, subtly, diverted you from the very path the journalist had later followed to her death. Was he compromised then? Or was he a willing participant in the web you were now untangling? You pulled out your old, burner phone, its screen a dull glow in the cavernous space. You found his number, an old contact resurrected from a buried corner of your memory. A pause, heavy with unspoken history. Thorne. Haven't heard from you in years. What do you want? His voice was guarded, a subtle shift in its timbre, a tightening around the edges. Just a question about the old Iron Gate operation, you said, feigning casual curiosity. Remember those land deals? You could almost feel him constructing his response, choosing his words with care. Water under the bridge, Thorne. Small time. We had bigger fish to fry. Why this sudden interest? Just reviewing some old files, you lied, your voice even. Curious how things played out. Did anything ever come of those properties? Not that I recall, he said, too quickly, too smoothly. Just another dead end. Move on, Thorne. It wasn't just a brush-off, it was a command, laced with an underlying current of warning. The line went dead. You stared at the phone, the cold metal a mirror to the icy certainty forming in your gut. He knew. He had known then, and he knew now. Your own downfall, the very failure that had stripped you of your badge, was not simply your error in judgment. It was a calculated manipulation, a betrayal orchestrated by someone you trusted, someone who had stood right beside you. The weight of it pressed down, a suffocating shroud. The line between hunter and hunted blurred. You were not merely investigating a murder, you were excavating your own past, confronting the ghosts of trust and deception. The stakes had just become immeasurably higher, the path forward fraught with personal peril. The deadline hummed, a flat, metallic whisper against your ear, a chilling echo of the warning just delivered. Move on, Thorne. You've got nothing there. But the very force of the dismissal, the hurried, silken menace in the voice, spoke volumes. It wasn't a dead end. It was a live wire, sparking with danger, and you, Marcus, were closer than ever to touching it. A bitter resolve settled in your gut, cold and hard. You remembered a forgotten marginalia in the journalist's worn notebook, a cryptic sequence of letters and numbers scrawled beside a contact name, a name you'd dismissed as irrelevant years ago. He had been the journalist's source on a story about human trafficking, a story that never saw print. Now, the coded sequence clicked into place, not as a phone number, but as a registry identifier, a unique fingerprint within a labyrinthine system. The air here was thick with unspoken stories, with the dust of thwarted hopes. Inside, The corridors were a sterile maze of linoleum and fluorescent hum. Every door was a barrier, every glance from a passing guard a silent challenge. You moved through it all, a phantom of your former authority, navigating the bureaucratic currents with a carefully constructed facade of official business. No visitors for Isabel, the facility administrator stated, her voice flat, her eyes scanning your forged credentials with a disinterest that bordered on contempt. She's a flight risk. High priority. Humanitarian request, you countered, your voice a low, steady current. New information regarding her asylum claim. Urgent. You pushed a flimsy, official-looking document across the desk, a fabrication born of desperation and old contacts. It was a bluff, a gamble, but the administrator, overwhelmed by the endless tide of paperwork, simply sighed and gestured towards a numbered door. 20 minutes. No more. The small room was stark, a table and 2 bolted chairs its only furniture. Isabel sat hunched, her gaze fixed on the scuffed floor. Her face, etched with fatigue, held a familiar fear you recognized from countless past encounters with the vulnerable. I'm here about the journalist. The one you worked with. They. Anything at all? Something important? Her eyes darted to the door, then back to you. Fear was a palpable thing in the room, a third presence. He was careful, Isabel murmured, her words a hesitant stream. She knew. They were watching. She said if anything happened, I should hold it. Until someone came who knew about the stone in the river. The phrase hit you like a physical blow. Stone in the river. You remembered it from a half-finished poem in the journalist's journal, dismissed as artistic flourish. It was a code. A drop point. What is it, Isabel? You urged, your voice a low plea. Where is it? She hesitated, her gaze searching yours, weighing the risk. Then, with a sudden, decisive movement, she reached under the table, her fingers tracing a line beneath the seat of her chair. She unpeeled a strip of worn adhesive tape, revealing a small, flat object no bigger than your thumbnail. Said it was everything. She slid the chip across the table. She said it would expose them all. The politician. The others. This was it. The missing piece. The stone in the river. You had a specialized reader in your bag, a relic from your past life, designed for such obscure data formats. Back in your vehicle, away from the sterile confines of the facility, you connected the chip. The screen flickered, then burst to life with a torrent of information. Financial ledgers scrolled, names you recognized from the upper echelons of power intertwined with shell corporations and offshore accounts. You saw the politician's name, Marcus Thorne, not merely linked, but at the very heart of a complex web of influence peddling, blackmail, and illicit funding. The journalist hadn't just been investigating a story, he had uncovered a network that corrupted the very foundations of the nation. Her murder wasn't a random act, it was a silencing, precise and brutal. The truth, stark and undeniable, laid bare before you. The personal cost would be immense. Your badge was long gone, your reputation in tatters. But this wasn't about redemption anymore, not entirely. It was about justice, a ferocious, burning need that eclipsed everything else. The warning from the contact echoed again, but this time, it was a challenge, not a deterrent. You had something now. Something real. And there was no turning back. You would see this through, Marcus, to the bitter end, no matter what came for you. The fight had just begun. The vehicle's engine hummed a low, constant thrum, a deceptive lullaby against the frantic beat of your own pulse. You pulled the specialized reader from your worn satchel, its familiar weight a comfort, a whisper of the life you once commanded. The chip, a sliver of obsidian knowledge, slid into the slot with a faint click. The air in the confined space grew thick with anticipation, each tick of the internal fan a hammer blow against the silence. Then, clarity. The jumbled characters coalesced into legible text, a stark, damning narrative unfolding before you. Illicit financial transfers, a spiderweb of shell corporations, their tendrils reaching from offshore accounts to domestic political action committees. Millions, siphoned and redirected, painting a picture of systemic corruption far grander than you'd dared to imagine. And there, stark and undeniable, was a name, a high-ranking official within the politician's inner circle, a man whose public persona radiated unimpeachable integrity. His signature, digitized and irrefutable, linked directly to the most egregious of the transactions. Midnight. A sudden, sharp rap on the window jolted you, a sound like a gunshot in the still night. Your head whipped around. No one. Just the wind, perhaps, or the shifting of the vehicle. But the hairs on your nape prickled. They knew. The act of deciphering the chip, the very act of holding this truth in your hands, had triggered a silent alarm. You were no longer merely investigating, you were being hunted. Before you could fully process the implications, a distant siren wailed, growing in intensity, not a standard police cruiser, but something heavier, more deliberate. It was a sound designed to intimidate, to announce arrival, to instill fear. Your eyes darted to the rearview mirror. A pair of headlights, too bright, too focused, appeared at the end of the street, moving with predatory intent. "Damn it," you muttered, the words a raw exhalation. This vehicle, your last bastion of anonymity, was compromised. There was no time for finesse, no room for a graceful exit. You ripped the chip from the reader, stuffing it into a hidden pocket sewn into your jacket lining. The reader itself, a small, intricate piece of hardware, was smashed against the dashboard, its delicate circuits shattering with a satisfying crunch. The siren shrieked closer, a hungry beast closing in. You didn't look back. There was no point. Your instincts, honed by years of living on the edge, screamed for movement, for flight. Your mind raced, a whirlwind of strategies and escape routes. Why there? You moved with a practiced fluidity, a ghost in the urban labyrinth. Through a narrow gap between two dumpsters, over a low fence slick with grime, your breath rasping in your throat. The distant headlights were now a garish glare, sweeping the alley you had just vacated. Shouts, muffled but urgent, followed. They were close. Too close. A payphone, miraculously still operational, beckoned from a dimly lit corner. You fished out a handful of coins, your fingers fumbling slightly with the adrenaline surge. You dialed a number etched into the deepest recesses of your memory, a lifeline to a past you thought you'd buried. "It's Marcus," you whispered into the receiver, your voice tight, strained. "I need a ghost. Fast." And away into the facility. "Tonight." A pause, heavy with unspoken questions. Then, a gruff, familiar voice, "You always pick the worst times, Thorne." "What kind of ghost?" The kind that disappears into thin air, you replied, glancing over your shoulder. A lone figure, silhouetted against the streetlights, seemed to be scanning the alley mouth. And I need eyes and ears inside. Someone who knows the layout, the blind spots. That's a tall order, even for you, the voice grumbled. But I owe you one. Don't move. I'll send a runner. They'll have a burner and details. Be ready to vanish. You hung up, the receiver clattering against the metal box. The words "don't move" echoed mockingly. You couldn't afford to stay still. Not now. Not with the full weight of their resources bearing down. The city, once a canvas of routine, had transformed into a hostile landscape. You were a lone wolf, harried and hunted, but armed with a truth that could bring down titans. You had to get there, not just to uncover the last piece, but to confront the architects of this elaborate, deadly deception. The pursuit had begun in earnest, and you, Marcus Thorne, were ready to run. The city, a sprawling canvas of neon and shadow, stretched before you, each glinting window a potential eye. You moved, a phantom amidst the hurried footsteps of the indifferent, the mocking echo of "don't move" a cold spur in your gut. Stillness was surrender, and you had long passed the point of retreat. Your destination, a name whispered in the dying breath of a forgotten contact, drew you through the labyrinthine streets. You had navigated similar structures in a past life, their sterile corridors and watchful eyes of familiar terrain. Now, you were an intruder, a ghost seeking a ghost. You slipped through a service entrance, the clang of a metal door echoing too loudly in the sudden quiet. The interior was a stark landscape of polished linoleum and pale, institutional green. The scent of disinfectant and stale air clung to everything. You found him in a visitation room, behind reinforced glass, a phone pressed to his ear. His face, etched with a weariness that went beyond mere fatigue, brightened imperceptibly when he saw you. He knew why you were there. The journalist, the one whose unsolved murder had become your cross to bear, had cultivated many sources. Sooner or later. They were right, you replied, your voice low, steady. You have something for me. Something for her. He nodded, his eyes darting to the door, then back to yours. He was thorough. Too thorough. She knew about the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the network of influence. But she didn't know about the cleaner dot. He paused, letting the word hang in the air, heavy with implication. The one who handled the loose ends. A digital one. Encrypted. He was going to expose the whole funding scheme, the dirty money flowing into the campaign from the organization. And the identity of the cleaner, a former military operative, now a private contractor, deeply embedded. He's the one who orchestrated her accident. Where is it? You pressed, your breath catching in your throat. This was it. The final piece. A dead drop. She told me about it, just in case. A contingency. You'll need her access codes. I wrote them down for you. He slid a folded piece of paper across the metal counter. A guard, passing by, cast a cursory glance, but saw nothing amiss. On it, a string of alphanumeric characters and a small, almost imperceptible symbol, a raven with outstretched wings. The journalist's signature. Undeniable proof. The coordinates led you to a derelict factory, its skeletal frame silhouetted against the bruised sky. The politician's name appeared repeatedly, a spider at the center of a poisoned web. The cleaner's identity was there too, a face now familiar from old police files. The undeniable proof. The weight of it settled in your hands, in your mind. This was not just a case anymore, it was a reckoning. The full scope of their conspiracy laid bare. It was enough. More than enough. You knew what you had to do. You couldn't just hand this over to the authorities. They were compromised, infiltrated. This required a direct strike. A public exposure that would detonate in the heart of their power. You formulated a plan, a dangerous gambit that would force their hand. A single, cryptic email, hinting at the depth of your knowledge, the irrefutable evidence you possessed, and a challenge. A time. A place. You typed the message, your fingers flying across the keyboard, each word a stone thrown into a quiet pond. You knew this was a lure, a trap laid not by you, but for you. They would come for you. They had to. The stakes were too high, the truth too devastating. But you also knew that in their haste, in their panic, they would expose themselves. You sent the email, the digital pulse carrying your challenge into the ether. The hunt was over. The prey had become the hunter, stalking its way into the lion's den. You had the proof. Now, you needed to deliver it. And you were ready to walk into the fire. The confrontation was set. The city held its breath. He slid a folded piece of paper across the metal counter. You picked up the paper, your fingers brushing against the cold, worn surface. On it, a string of alphanumeric characters and a small, almost imperceptible symbol, a raven with its wings unfurled, etched with a needle's precision. Fluorescent lights hummed, casting a pallid glow on the concrete floors. Your gaze fixed on the paper, the raven symbol blooming in your mind's eye. It wasn't just a bird, it was a signature, a brand. The journalist had mentioned a shadow's mark in her fragmented notes, a symbol she'd seen on a hidden ledger. This was it. The alphanumeric string pulsed with unspoken meaning, B4-7 Delta 9. Not a cell number, not a file. It was a sector, a clandestine quadrant within the vast, labyrinthine structure of the facility itself. This facility, designed for holding, was also a crucible, forging something far more insidious. You moved, a phantom in the sterile corridors, the paper clutched tight. Your steps echoed, a lonely rhythm against the muffled sounds of lives suspended. Past the common areas, beyond the administrative offices, you found a maintenance access panel, its lock suspiciously new, bearing a faint, almost invisible scratch, the ghost of a raven's wing. With a practiced hand, you bypassed the lock. The panel hissed open, revealing a narrow, unlit shaft. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and old metal. You descended into the gloom, your senses sharpened, every creak and distant clank a potential warning. The shaft opened into a vast, cavernous space beneath the facility, a forgotten underground bunker repurposed. Here, the sterile white gave way to raw concrete and exposed conduits, a testament to hurried, illicit construction. Before you, a tableau of controlled chaos, banks of humming servers, glowing screens displaying intricate data streams, and several figures moving with purpose. At the center, a man stood, his back to you, overseeing the operations. So, you found your way, the overseer's voice cut through the low thrum of machinery, devoid of surprise. Beside him, two hulking figures, the enforcers, shifted, their hands already moving towards concealed weapons. You stepped fully into the light, your presence a stark challenge to their hidden world. The journalist found her way too, didn't she? Until you made sure she couldn't report what she saw. The overseer offered a faint, unsettling smile. A regrettable incident. Loose ends, you understand. Loose ends, you echoed, your voice steady despite the tremor of adrenaline that coursed through you. It's a funnel. A pipeline. You're exploiting the vulnerable. Manipulating their status, moving them through a system you control, all to generate untraceable funds. The overseer's smile widened, a predatory flash. A bold accusation, Marcus Thorne. And one you'll find difficult to prove from where you stand. The funds, you pressed on, ignoring the subtle threat, your eyes sweeping over the enforcers, gauging their readiness. They're not just for your pocket. They're washing clean the dirty money of the politician's campaign, fueling his rise. The journalist uncovered it all, you continued, projecting your voice, letting it fill the space. She found the ledgers, the coded transfers, the names of the intermediaries. She even found your raven mark, didn't she? Your personal signature on this vile enterprise. He was going to expose how you use desperate lives as currency, how you bend the law, how you corrupt the very notion of justice. He was a nuisance, the overseer stated, his voice now edged with impatience, and she learned the price of meddling. The price was her life, you shot back, your eyes locking onto his. And the price of my disgrace, years ago, when I failed to stop a similar network. A network that, I now realize, bore your fingerprints even then. You've been building this for a long time, haven't you? Weaving your web through the highest echelons, buying influence, silencing dissent. The enforcers moved, a synchronized blur. Your hand shot out, grabbing a discarded metal pipe, its weight familiar, comforting. You parried a second blow, the clang of metal against metal echoing sharply in the bunker. You think a pipe changes anything, Marcus? The overseer scoffed, his gaze unwavering. This operation is too vast, too deeply rooted. Maybe, you conceded, dodging another attack, the pipe a defensive extension of your arm. But the truth, once spoken, finds its own wings. The journalist's notes, her final encrypted message, it's out there. A dead man's switch. If I don't report back, it all goes public. Every ledger, every transfer, every name. It was a bluff, a desperate gambit, but the flicker in the overseer's eyes told you it had struck home. The enforcers paused, their movements less fluid, a momentary hesitation born of doubt. You're finished, you declared, your voice ringing with a newfound authority, despite the odds. The politician, your entire network. It's crumbling. Get him. The fight was brutal, a symphony of grunts and clanging metal. You knew you couldn't defeat them both, not here, not alone. But you had spoken the truth, you had laid bare the rot. The seed of doubt was planted, and the raven's wings, once a mark of death, were now a symbol of exposure. The fight for justice had just begun. The pipe, a makeshift scepter of your desperate truth, now lies heavy in your hand, a cold extension of your weary arm. The enforcers, their brutal ballet brought to an abrupt halt, are sprawled on the grimy floor, not defeated by your strength alone, but by the unexpected blare of sirens that had sliced through the warehouse's oppressive silence just as your last, defiant words echoed. You stand, a silhouette against the sudden glare of flashing blue and red, the cacophony of approaching vehicles a violent counterpoint to the ringing in your ears. Your ribs scream with each shallow breath, a dull throb in your temple threatens to eclipse thought, yet a strange, fragile clarity settles upon you. You did it. You pushed the domino. Hands, firm but not unkind, guide you away from the still forms of your adversaries. Questions, sharp and rapid, pierce the haze. The warehouse, once a crucible of your desperate gamble, is now a hive of meticulous investigation. A colleague, his face etched with a mix of awe and concern, claps you on the shoulder. "Marcus," he says, his voice low, "you broke it wide open. The world outside has indeed shattered. The news cycles are a maelstrom of furious speculation, righteous indignation. Your name, Marcus Thorne, once synonymous with disgrace, now flashes across screens, whispered in hushed tones, or shouted in outrage. It is the fuse that lit the powder keg. The prominent politician, once a figure of unassailable power, is now at the epicenter of a storm. Allegations of corruption, conspiracy, and complicity in murder ripple outwards, threatening to dismantle not just a campaign, but an entire network of influence. The public reaction is a tidal wave. Protests erupt in city squares, demanding accountability. Editorials decry the rot at the heart of power. The sheer scale of the deception, the callous disregard for human life, has struck a raw nerve. You watch it unfold on a small, flickering screen in the cramped, temporary office you've been assigned, a strange sense of detachment washing over you. This is what you fought for. This is the truth, unleashed. Then, the summons. Not an arrest, not a reprimand, but a request. A senior investigator, his face grim, informs you that a key figure, a high-ranking aide to the disgraced politician, known to be a crucial link in the organization's operational chain, has been intercepted. He was attempting to flee, the investigator explains. His gaze unblinking. Caught trying to secure passage out of the country. We need you to identify him, Marcus. You nod, the weariness momentarily forgotten, replaced by a fresh surge of purpose. This isn't over. Not yet. The drive is a blur of city lights and the muted thrum of the vehicle. It's a place designed for containment, for the methodical processing of lives in transit, a stark testament to borders and bureaucracy. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of disinfectant and a quiet, nervous energy. You are led to a viewing room, separated by thick, reflective glass from a small, sparsely furnished interview space. On the other side, a man sits at a steel table, his shoulders slumped, his eyes vacant. It is him. The aide. The one whose hushed conversations you'd overheard, whose coded messages you'd painstakingly pieced together. His expensive suit is rumpled, his usually arrogant demeanor replaced by a fragile shell of defeat. He looks smaller now, stripped of his power, his influence, his carefully constructed facade. A uniformed officer points to a dossier on the table in front of the aide. We found this, he murmurs, his voice low enough not to carry through the glass. Hidden in his briefcase. A ledger. Names, dates, transactions. Payments to shell corporations, offshore accounts. It details everything. The source of the funding, the network of illicit activities, even the contingency plans for silencing dissenters. The revelation hits you with the force of a physical blow, yet it's not surprise, but a grim satisfaction that settles deep in your bones. It confirms the depth of their depravity, the sprawling reach of their tendrils into every facet of society. The journalist hadn't merely stumbled upon a local corruption ring, they had unearthed a hydra. He is just one head, severed, but the body of the beast is now exposed. The quiet hum of the facility, the distant chatter of voices, all fade into the background. Your gaze drifts beyond the glass, beyond the walls of the facility, to the city lights twinkling in the distance. The fight is over, the truth is out, but the cost? The cost is a quiet weight in your chest. Redemption, you realize, is not a sudden, glorious sunrise, but the slow, arduous climb out of a long, dark night. The chill of the evening, a thin, persistent blade, finds its way through your coat as you step onto the tarmac. The roar of a descending jet slices the air, a metallic shriek that vibrates through the soles of your shoes. Its very architecture speaks of containment, of lives paused in transit, and tonight, it holds a different kind of captive. The ledger, its pages etched with the meticulous accounting of depravity, has done its work. It led the authorities here, to this place where desperate attempts at anonymity often culminate. You walk with a purposeful stride, the weight of years of pursuit settling into a grim satisfaction within your bones. The air here is sharp with the scent of jet fuel and the underlying, metallic tang of institutional sterility. A senior officer, his face a map of weary determination, meets your gaze with a curt nod. He was trying to board a private jet, the officer states, his voice clipped over the lingering drone of the aircraft. Falsified papers. A last-ditch effort. You follow the officer through a series of reinforced doors, each one clanging shut behind you with a definitive thud. The corridors are long, fluorescent-lit tunnels, echoing with the distant, indistinct sounds of voices and shuffling feet. The tension hums in the air, a low frequency that raises the hairs on your arms. This isn't just about an arrest, it's about the crumbling of an empire, the severance of a cancerous limb from the body politic. Finally, you reach a secure interrogation room. Through the one-way glass, you see him. The politician. He sits at a bare metal table, his hands clasped, knuckles white. The arrogance, once a palpable aura around him, has been stripped away, leaving only a brittle shell of defiance. You enter the room, the door clicking shut behind you. He doesn't flinch, but his eyes, cold and calculating, fix on yours. Marcus Thorne, he sneers, the name a venomous whisper. Still chasing ghosts, I see. Some ghosts refuse to stay buried, you counter, your voice steady, devoid of the tremor that once defined your encounters with such power. You slide a copy of the ledger across the table, its cover glinting under the harsh light. Especially when their stories are written in blood in black ink. His gaze flickers to the ledger, then back to you, a flicker of something akin to fear, quickly masked by contempt. A ledger. Childish. Payments authorized by your signature, politician. Right before her body was found. The politician's jaw tightens. His composure, once an impenetrable shield, begins to fray at the edges. The room feels smaller, the air growing heavy with unspoken truths. This is the event, the final, irrefutable confrontation, the unmasking of the man behind the carefully constructed facade. His attempted escape, foiled at this very facility, underscores the depth of his desperation and guilt. You think this changes anything? He scoffs, a desperate attempt to regain control. There are always bigger fish, Thorne. Always higher hands pulling the strings. This is the reveal/discovery. His words confirm what you had suspected, the politician was a pawn, albeit a powerful one, in a game far older and more intricate than you had initially conceived. The murder of the journalist was a desperate measure to protect not just his career, but the entire network she threatened to expose. His admission, however veiled, validates every sleepless night, every dangerous lead. You lean forward, your voice dropping to a low, intense register. Perhaps. But those hands just lost their most visible puppet. The illusion of his invincibility has shattered, leaving him exposed, vulnerable. This is the moment where the scales finally tip, where justice, however slow and arduous, finds its footing. Cooler, perhaps, but also cleaner. The roar of the jets overhead no longer sounds like a shriek, but a distant hum, a reminder of the world's relentless motion. The image of the politician, stripped of his power, is etched in your mind, but it no longer carries the sting of your past failures. The ghosts that haunted you, the journalist's unanswered questions, the weight of your lost badge, they begin to recede, fading into the quiet corners of memory. The path ahead is not clear, not yet. This victory, while significant, is a single battle won in a larger, ongoing war against unseen forces. Not every thread is tied, not every conspirator brought to light. The politician's veiled warning of higher hands lingers, a new challenge waiting in the wings. But the gnawing guilt, the corrosive regret that had defined your existence for so long, has finally found its measure of peace. You are no longer merely Marcus Thorne, the disgraced detective. You are Marcus Thorne, the man who walked through fire, confronted his demons, and, against all odds, brought a semblance of justice to a world that desperately needed it. The future remains an unwritten page, but as you step into the uncertain dawn, a quiet resolve settles within you, a new purpose stirring in the depths of your being. The journey has not ended, but a crucial chapter has closed, and you are ready for whatever comes next.